All right. Call the meeting to order. Tiffany, please take the roll.
Councilwoman Garvey.
Present.
Councilman Brennan.
Present.
Councilman Green.
Present.
Councilman Bundy.
Councilman Bundy is on vacation.
Mayor Sykes.
Present. Let the record reflect that we do have a quorum. Run down to department head comments. Jake, got anything real quick? Shasta?
Due to the library hours being changed with approval from the library board, some of our programming has changed and it's just shifted an hour earlier, starting and then ending an hour earlier. So please look at the calendars and the newsletters to look at those updated times. We're excited to have the Idaho Volunteer Lawyers Program. They will actually be providing a safety net for low-income individuals and families in Idaho who require civil legal service and cannot afford to pay them. So we'll have a QR code that patrons can actually log on and sign up to have time with legal counsel. So we're excited to have that available to the public. The Friends of the Library will be having their book sale next weekend. Please support the Friends. They are the ones that help us with additional funding for programs like the American Girl Tea Party, Dangerous Day for Boys, Santa comes to the library, and so on and so forth. So please, please, please buy books. Just FYI, we have a murder mystery at the end of the month, so please make sure if you want to attend, you sign up for that as well as the adult craft night. That's all I got.
All right, thank you. That's
I just had one quick reminder for you guys that next Wednesday, August 2nd, is our ribbon cutting with the Mountain Home Adult Training Academy and Elmore Development, as well as in partnership with the Urban Renewal Agency. Governor Little is expected to come. I can confirm that at least one news channel will be here following him, but probably more. I know KTVB is following the story. I would assume at least Channel 6 and Channel 2 as well. So if you guys are coming out, dress your best, because Mountain Home will be highlighted. So it'll be good stuff. Like I said, Governor Little will be here, and that'll be at 11 a.m. next Wednesday. And then, I don't know if you guys saw your emails. Recently, we did get a groundbreaking ceremony invite to the Liberty Chapel Next Dream Center. And I forwarded out to the council and mayor. It is not an event organized by the city. It was just an event that they shared with us to share with you, to invite you out there at Liberty Chapel. It should be in all of your inboxes, but that is Friday at, I believe, 10 a.m. And that is their groundbreaking ceremony for their access road for a big community event center, essentially. You'll see all those details in that invite. But I just wanted to let you guys know that it's not city sponsored, and it is outside of city limits, but partnerships and good neighbors, things like that. So I want to pass it your way.
thank you. Thanks, Fred. Chief Thompson.
Just National Night Out, that'll be next Tuesday night at Carnival Park. Invite the community to attend that event, to the park with us, get to know the department, the officers, and role they play with each other. It'll be 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Hot dogs will be available. The flyers will go out on our website here in the next day or so.
Thanks, Chief. Don?
We completed our part of the West Fifth North project as far as removing all the manholes, lowering them and getting them backfilled so when they come in and do the milling, that's all done. And as far as out at the treatment plant is concerned, we're down to 165 million gallons for the land application left to use.
So we're sitting real good then?
Yes. we
Good.
are.
Not over or high, but
No, we're really good
okay.
right now.
Good.
You still got a lot of season left to go.
Right. Chief Moore?
Mayor, council, nothing of real substance, just day-to-day operational stuff and our training. Everything's going well.
You did the one on Highway 30. Have you started the sequel one yet?
We've been up there training. We haven't done anything in terms of live fire stuff, but we have been up there training, doing some of our RIT training, rapid intervention team training.
Perfect. Tiffany?
Mayor
Paula?
No, thank you, sir.
Paul? No, sir. All right. Council got anything? All right. Run down to presentation by James Blitzo with Keller and Association. James, come on down, brother.
Just a second, I get up here. Feds it wants to There we go. And this is Eric Roundy. Come on up here too, Eric. Eric is with Keller Associates, one of our senior engineers when it comes to wastewater treatment. He's our guru. So he was involved with the wastewater treatment component of your planning study. I plan on going through these slides relatively quickly. Most of them are the same, just slightly updated from a year ago. So you might recall we went through the planning process. We got to a spot where basically near the very end, and came up with, well, what about the Air Force Base? Should we consider combining with them? And so we kind of put things on pause while we explore that with the base. That effort's been completed, and we'll summarize those in a few slides with this presentation as well. So feel free to interrupt as we go if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll just kind of move along fairly quickly, cover the kind of by way of review and summarize some of the highlights. So first off, this is your projection of your populations. We just assumed similar type of growth that's occurred historically will continue. This affects really the timing of your capital improvements. And if you look at what this means, we typically look at 2 planning periods. Look at about 20 years for your treatment, because a lot of your equipment and things like that will wear out within 20 years or so. Your pipelines have a much longer life, so we typically look at 50 years, so kind of more of a build-out type scenario there. When we look at your system, this is what we looked at as far as where the growth would occur during that planning period. So we've allocated the people, and this really affects your collection system plan. We also, if you look at the area in red, it's a pretty good industrial contribution. Overall, that contribute a fair amount of flow. So we assume some flow, about 0.3 million gallons of added industrial flow over the 20-year horizon. That's about a little over 10% of your total system. So if that doesn't occur, you build in a little bit of buffer into your planning, but again, it gives you some type of provisions to be able to accommodate that type of growth and encourage that type of growth within the city. On your collection system, our evaluation was mostly focused on capacity, and overall your capacity looks pretty good. I'll show that in a minute. Your system is comprised of 77 miles of pipe, and a lot of it's getting a little on the older side. Most of it's 8 inches in diameter. When you look at where are your capacity concerns, right now there's a section on 14th that's kind of starts there just south of American Legion and goes north. That's where I would say, once a year you might get your flows kind of bumping up full pipe, maybe backing up a tiny bit up into manholes. Nothing so serious that it's going to be overflowing, but it's definitely an area of concern and something you should stay ahead of. In Idaho, typically, if you get to a full pipe condition, that's justification to move forward as a concern for undersized pipe. So, but overall, the rest of the system looks pretty good. The one thing that we didn't look at in a lot of detail was just your overall conditions. We did do sort of a high-level look at what kind of replacement budgets might be recommended just to stay on top of your system, to maintain a similar type of level of service for your constituents, because it will age. It's out of sight, but as we saw recently on the pipeline project that we're doing for the water line on 14th, a lot of those sewer services were in poor condition. When we started crossing them, they had to end up replacing some of those. So you'll see that that's an indication of really how your collection system will age over time, and so it's important you continue to make that investment to preserve the asset.
Councilman Brennan?
James, do you mind if I jump in with questions while you go through this? I just want to confirm Public Works not here anymore, but this is already well on the radar of our system engineers, right? The 14th Street.
Yeah, you are very much, in fact,
working on it.
The project is out to bid right now.
Right.
We'll fix this.
Okay.
So you're ahead of the curve.
Thank you.
Yeah, and really to get all the way through your system and only have one thing like this is pretty good. I would say one other cool thing about Mountain Home is I rarely see a system this size with just one tiny lift station. I mean, it's usually you'd see a dozen or more. So it's You're fortunate in having a fairly simple system, and a system that you've been fairly proactive in your rates, and we'll show that in a little bit too, what that might mean to kind of stay ahead of the curve for your rates. If you did nothing and just kept on putting people in, improving development and sticking all those flows in, you'd see that you have a lot of problems. So again, it's important that you be aware of this, and you stay ahead of the curve. Periodically, you'll update this plan for major developments. You might take a look to see if that might affect the sequencing or prioritization that's in here, but this gives you a preview of kind of where your future bottlenecks might be. So what's recommended? Well, for the short term, the run item in red, that's your priority 1A project, and that's what's out to bid. Hopefully we'll have some competitive bids that should open next week. The next item, you anticipate doing that project in the 5 to 10 year, that's a section on 14th, kind of closer to American Legion. And then the other item that we've identified as sort of the bigger dollar investment is this new west interceptor that kind of goes west of the city, loops back up kind of near Marathon Way, and that basically allows continued development to the west. It serves as a relief to your to the rest of your system. So you might not recall, but I was here 15 years ago when when we put in the west, we called it at that time the West Relief Interceptor, that goes through the city, and that basically cut off about a third or half of the flow, and routed it down a new trunk line, and that's what's allowed your development for the last 15 years. So this new line there, and then also a future one to the west or to the east, provide the same type of infrastructure to be able to allow continued growth. With that, I'll turn it over to Eric, who'll talk a little about the treatment.
Okay, as James mentioned, we've talked about this a year ago, so I'll just kind of skim over things. So the treatment plant was constructed in 1961 and added on. It still utilizes chlorine gas disinfection. It's a facultative system, so there's no mechanical treatment in the lagoons. It all takes place by wind and waves and algae. So there's not a lot to do at the treatment plant for treatment, but the effluent quality is able to meet Class C and be land applied. So it's one of the largest Class C systems that I'm aware of.
Largest in Idaho.
What are some of the issues at the treatment plant? As James mentioned, with treatment plant, we look at the next 20 years, and probably by the end of the 20-year period, the things that stand out are the influent pumps will be nearing capacity, and then the influent screen, which was installed about almost 20 years ago, that'll need to be likely replaced.
So Eric, the Archimedes screws, all three of them are already at capacity, or because I thought we only do one at a time, and then we cycle them, just to make sure that
Yeah. So right now, each of those have a 4 MGD capacity. So if everything grew the way we projected, you'd be a little over 8 MGD in 20 years. So you need to always have capacity to have one offline. So as soon as you get over 8, you've exceeded the firm capacity of that pumping. But yeah, it's going to be very close to the 20-year mark before you might need to add a 4th screw.
Or we looked at talking to the manufacturers. There's some things that we can do to maybe enhance the capacity so that you don't need to add a 4th. So, yeah.
Okay. It's kind of scary. We had them not turn on one day, and we understand that
That could be pretty scary.
Yeah, we ended up having to lime a lot of things, and it was weird. Something tripped, and not one of them got caught. So wasn't that a SCADA thing, or what happened, Don? Real quick.
It was a SCADA thing.
Yeah.
They tripped out and SCADA failed. And the guy that was on call
Didn't check the alert.
didn't respond.
So
So there was no.
yeah, okay.
It's usually a combination of things. And that's one thing, is if you look to upgrade, you know, potentially you add in redundancy, and, you know, maybe you have two level controls, or you do have standby power, you do have, you know, parallel channel, you have manual screen to back up your, see, you try to build in a lot of redundancy, and that's why DEQ requires that, but
For sure.
there's always some risk.
Okay.
Okay, facultative lagoons, they're loaded pretty high with the influent organics, and we're seeing some sludge deposition in the lagoons, which affects the treatment capacity, and so that's concerning. Then the chlorine disinfection is the gas chlorine system, which is has worked well. However, it's a hazardous chemical, and because of that, there's some risks continuing that direction.
Is there another system that we could use that's a little bit more, I wouldn't say more efficient, but less corrosive? Because I know we had to go out and fix a backflow, wasn't it? We have to fix it every year. I went and saw the guys.
Oh, yeah, that's on the supplemental well, and that's not corrosive or anything, but it's just that environment, it's pretty tough on the equipment. And even with the chlorine gas is still, you know, not only is it really dangerous to use, I think we're about, with all the other stuff, with the coontail buildup and all that other stuff, we're reaching our capacity where we can chlorinate the water good enough to maintain the Class C without having some issues.
So you guys are gonna give some options of upgrades?
Yeah, so we talked about that in the planning study. We looked at different types of disinfection, and what we recommended in the capital improvement plan was to switch to a liquid chlorine system, so, and add capacity so that you know, it could deal with the additional flows, and coontail, as was mentioned. Okay, winter storage and land application. I think it's been brought up before. At certain years, the storage capacity has been a limitation, and so that is definitely something that's needing to be addressed. And likewise, as you continue to grow, the amount of land application area that's needed for those or for that water to irrigate on increases. But during that, again, 20-year period, we anticipate that the land application area should be sufficient. But there is some suitability concerns with the area that's currently not farmed. And so we've included some budget in there to address those issues. Okay, and then a year ago we went over some different, you know, as was mentioned, this is kind of an unusual situation to have facultative lagoons with this size of facility or city, and so usually you switch to a mechanical type treatment plant. So we looked at different options there just to see if it would make sense at this time. And so so we looked at, you know, continuing with facultative lagoons or changing to an aerated lagoon, and then we looked at you know, mechanical treatment in different configurations, and also different recycled water opportunities with those. by adding filtration or going to membrane bioreactor. So we looked at several different options. We worked with city staff and evaluated or did a high-level evaluation looking at different screening criteria and came up with 3 different options, which we looked at in more detail. And the first option was sticking with the lagoons type system, but adding some aeration to deal with the high organics in those first lagoons. So it's the aerated lagoon option. And so we had some improvements that went along with those. The liners for a lot of the lagoons are well beyond their lifespan, so we tried to be overly conservative and assume that those liners would need to be replaced in the 20-year period. That may or may not happen, but we wanted to really give you a good look at whether to stay with lagoons, conservative look, or change to mechanical treatment.
And so some of those liners that aren't lying there bentonite, those got another 10-year shelf life on them.
Yes, every 10 years you have to get them tested, and over the decades, the period, you've been getting more and more seepage. So it's
Right.
you're on a course towards needing repair. And if you look at some of the liners, I think we went and looked at, I think it was at number 8 where the fish used to be. You can lift up a rock and you can see holes on the side. I mean, it's kind of plugged itself, if you will, a little bit, but it's definitely the liners. It's like a weed barrier is what it looks like. That's kind of seen it beyond its life. So definitely would anticipate you're going to have some of those over the 20-year period. I think we've assumed basically replacing all of them except for the 6, which was lined about a little over a decade ago. And yeah, so it's kind of a worst case. It's possible you might get some of those passing, and you might get 10 more years out of some of those, but that's what we assumed in this evaluation.
So you're saying 6 new liners for nine of our cells.
You've got 1 through 9, 5, 6 is combined.
It's
So
confusing.
yeah, and then we're also talking about recommending a new cell 10. So that's going to probably do that before you start any lining of any of your existing.
Right.
All right, and then the mechanical treatment, we looked at 2 different types, kind of an easier to operate option, which is alternative 2, which is oxidation ditches followed by a sand filter. And then the third alternative we looked at was a membrane bioreactor. So with that, you have the biological treatment and the membranes together, and the quality of the water is fairly high. And with both of those options, though, we anticipated being able to either use those for reuse, Class A or Class B, or rapid infiltration basins, which would basically allow the water to go down into the aquifer and be locally reused there. So
That was which one?
2 and 3.
2 and 3. Okay.
Both the mechanical options.
Okay.
Okay, this one's kind of hard to read, but kind of the highlights. Alternative 1, operator classification could stay the same. With 2 and 3, you'd be looking at a higher classification. Again, alternative 2 was kind of the simpler to operate option, and alternative 3 would be a little bit higher quality effluent. So. And then the next slide shows the cost comparison. We have both a construction cost during that 20-year period, and as well as a life cycle cost. So that's your electricity, your disposal costs, your operator costs, chemicals, all those factored in for your 20-year life cycle. So that would be your capital cost plus the O&M.
And probably mentioned one other thing about the alternative 1 is that's most likely going to have, you have the most flexibility for spreading those costs over time. the liner, this one fails, you replace it. The next one fails, you replace it. Whereas the alternative 2 and 3, you kind of bite the bullet, and it's like make that investment and make a major capital expense to convert to a mechanical plant. It's harder to phase.
Councilman.
What are the typical means of financing a project of such magnitude for municipalities?
Typical means are a combination of user rates and grants, if you can get them. So it's the sources of funding for this level is most likely going to be like the municipal bond market. Sometimes you might be able to get DEQ funds. Their funding is more limited. They have better interest rates, but it's also very competitive. And when we have big surges, sometimes there's more money. But like this last year, we submitted on the lagoons, and so did like 100 other communities in the state. I mean, so that it's very competitive, and the funding level is not anywhere near what the interest or desire was for it. So, but likely going to be municipal bond rate, probably 4.5% in current market conditions.
Okay. Thank you.
And as I mentioned, with alternative 1, we again wanted to be conservative, and the land application area is sufficient, but we also included $5.5 million in addition to that, because your land would be nearing capacity at that point. So this is kind of
ahead
a
of the curve.
Worst case cost here for alternative 1.
And so far, the city's been pretty progressive on kind of looking ahead. You got the land before you needed it. More land came available, you got it. And I would say be opportunistic still. If more land comes up available in the next 5-10 years that's adjacent to a big chunks, consider going ahead and getting that. And you've done the same thing with your water rights. It's a good investment, because those things only go up over time.
I guess this is a weird question. So let's just say we bit the bullet. We did the one that injects it back into the ground with our water rights. Does that give us our EDUs back?
All of these have a similar capacity as far as being able to serve your 20-year projected need. So when you say get the EDUs back, as far as it provides you protection, but can you get more water rights back from that? Yes.
Correct.
Likely you can get some type of credit. Department of Water Resources once gave us a letter saying that was the case. I think depending on who the director is, it varies a little bit on what their professional opinion is on that matter. But if you were to go into rapid infiltration, you'd want to explore that. The value of that, might be, if you look at the value of a couple MGD, it's probably only a couple million. So it's not like it's going to make the difference for the delta. But it is certainly when you look at your long-term strategy, it's nice to consider all the options on the table. Having a diverse portfolio in your water supplies is a benefit.
Okay, so, and as James mentioned, we really wanted to update the council about the study that we did at the Air Force Base, the Installation Resiliency Study, funded by the Department of Defense with a grant. And with that, I guess some of the main points was the Air Force Base had some additional capacity at their wastewater treatment plant, and they had existing RI basins. So they were looking at potentially using the city's water to, as was mentioned, to supplement the water underneath the Air Force Base. And so we looked at what that would entail from a high level standpoint. And so we looked at sending 1.5 MGD of the city's wastewater after the headworks to the Air Force Base treatment plant. So this was kind of the pipeline that we were looking at, going to the wastewater treatment plant, which is located on the far side of the Air Force Base. So it ended up being about a 13-mile pipeline to get out there. The wastewater treatment plant has some additional capacity. However, there would be some improvements that would be necessary to handle that much additional water. They would need an additional headwork screen. They would need two additional SBR basins, which is their treatment basins, more equalization, additional filter, aerobic digesters, and then also additional RI basins. So they were looking at needing to do some significant improvements in order to treat that water at the base. So because of that, it didn't end up being very favorable. So the first row shows what that cost would be for the city, $76 million, just for that 1.5 MGD. And then if you compare that to if the city would just treat that water at the wastewater treatment plant that you already have, the equivalent amount of improvements would be $33 million. So yeah, that was kind of one of the disappointing results of the study, was that there just wasn't enough capacity at the treatment plant out there. There's the capital costs, but then there's also the benefits. As was mentioned, you get to use the water. The city actually would lose that water by providing that to the Air Force Base, but the Air Force Base would benefit from that. They have some areas of nitrate concerns at the Air Force Base, and that would help alleviate some of those concerns. We looked at, we did a model, groundwater model, and saw how that might interact with the groundwater levels. However, there's just a lot to overcome with the capital cost there.
So, like, it always comes down to money at the end. This table's been updated since last year. Mostly it's been updated to reflect inflation. So if you look at what's needed right away, well, that's the Priority 1A project that's out to bid. And then the other item on the treatment side is this expanded lagoon seal number 10. So it's one that you've kind of tried to get DEQ funding for the last couple of years, haven't been shortlisted on that. So that's still on your to-do. It's kind of put you in a spot that gives you some flexibility for growth, and being able to also be able to take a cell offline for a rehab project, for example. So those are your two more urgent items, and then the other ones are just, there's a series of upgrades to just the one collections project, and then a number of treatment plant upgrades. So quite a bit on there. And how do we stay ahead of that? Well, we did take a look at some of those, a little bit of rate forecast, and see what that might look like. And as we did that, we also considered what's the impact of funding replacements. So this just on the collection system alone, to fully fund all your replacements, you're looking at like over $1 million a year. So every year you're not funding that just means that there's maybe a bigger bill due down the road. So right now you're putting aside quite a bit, so that's helpful, and that will be able to be used towards those improvements. And we're not proposing you go out and replace things before the end of their life, but just recognize that everything has a life, and at some point, that means a lot of rehab and replacement. And there are a lot of technologies that have been improving that are making some of those costs more affordable. Pipe bursting and lining of pipes to extend the life of those assets. So, what do things look like? If you were to go with a mechanical process, or for any type of investment, really, every $1 million you borrow, based on the number of EDUs you have right now, figure about an $8 or about 80 cents a month impact to the EDU. So if you borrow 10 million, you got to raise your rates $8.40 a month. If you want to borrow 20 million, $16. But you can see if you want to do a big treatment plant at 60, 70, 80, that's a really big ticket item. So that's one thing to consider. And then if you go mechanical, the added O&M costs associated with that is about $5 a month. So it's going to be more power, a little more labor intensive, more replacement of equipment and those kinds of things.
You're looking at $72 a month then.
Pretty big chunk. Well, that's the added cost over and above what you
Right.
current commitments are. So in this rate forecast, I looked at just your priority 1 improvements. So we're not worried about trying to build a whole treatment plant. We'll just get your lagoon expansion in place and start putting aside some increased. So what you have here is taking your existing operating costs and just inflated those. I've taken your expenses and inflated those. Sorry, your revenues are going to be a function of the rates. And then the annual replacements, I've got it starting about 100,000 and growing up to about 700,000 over the course of the next 5 years, working towards that 1 million plus. And then I show some expenses. So I show you fully funding your priority 1A sewer project. We'll see where those bids come in, but right now the market's suggesting it's on the higher side. I'm thinking about 1.8, 1.9 million. If we start with in the bank about 3 million between what you have in your different accounts, including your service availability fees, the bottom line just shows how the balance changes over time. So in this rate scenario, I figured you'd pay for about $2 million of your lagoons out of the bank, and you can choose to do that or not, and then you debt finance the rest. That's where that $470,000 a year goes towards paying the lagoons over the next 20 years. So if you wanted to not debt finance and pay all that up front, you'd be looking at quite a bit more rate impact just to get ahead of the curve. One thing that's worth mentioning is after 2029, your existing debt will retire. So I think that's about, Paul, you can correct me, it's about $350,000-ish a year, I think, that you're paying towards debt. So that can go towards your replacements, or it can go towards other additional debt if you needed to, or additional reserves for capital projects. But in this forecast is just assuming you keep at the 5% per year, which you've been doing, and that's also been a great thing. First time we came here and did the study, is like they hadn't raised the rate like in 20 years, and it was like $6, and it was like you just kill yourself when you're not proactive in staying ahead on your rates. So
DEQ wouldn't give us a loan because we weren't staying up with our rates.
You've got to qualify for grants, if they ever become available, you have to have a competitive rate, and so your rates are still very competitive. As far as when you look at mechanical plants, it's often to see in those $60 to $80 a month.
And I know inflation goes up, and the cost of goods and services went up, but 8 years ago or 10 years ago, to put a new lagoon in, it was like 1.5 million, and then it was 3 million. Now it's 7.5 million for a lagoon. It's just, maybe I'm simplifying it too much, but it's just dirt work, rock, and a plastic liner, and some tubing and
Yeah, I don't know if it's ever 1.5 because I think that might have been like 15 years ago. Because I think we spent about 2 on when we did 2.5. I think when we
maybe
did,
that's what it was.
about 2.5 when we did sell 5, 6.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything's gone up. It's crazy, really. I mean, just in the last couple of years. Yeah, we had a bid open last week that was over $1,000 a square foot for a CMU.
For a what building?
CMU block building. Yeah, so I mean, these don't reflect crazy things. This is kind of what we think the market is, but things are definitely higher than they were 3 to 5 years ago. Yeah.
Mayor,
Councilman Brennan.
here's my $1 million question here. If you lived in our community and paid taxes and user fees for this, which preferred alternative would you pick?
I would stick with the lagoons.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you too?
Yeah.
All right.
And have that claim to fame, largest lagoon system.
Yeah.
Keep it going.
Yeah, and really, a lot of that expense in the lagoons are your ponds. And as you continue to rehab those ponds, you can make them a little deeper, get a little more storage. But if you ever decide to switch in the future, that becomes a resource too. Right now you can send it with the mechanical plant. We didn't keep with those options. We didn't keep investing in more and more ponds. We just said if couldn't go in the existing ponds, stick it in the ground with rapid infiltration because it's expensive to build ponds. But if you stick this route and decide to go mechanical in 20 years, you'll have the investment where you have that flexibility. You can take all that water you've been storing all winter long and use it to irrigate with. And so even if you decide to change course down the road, I wouldn't say that there's some costs.
All right, council members. Questions for James?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
James, are you guys taking off or staying for the rest of our meeting?
I'm staying. Rich asked me to be prepared to talk a little bit about the new business, about the reduced water rate.
Yeah. We had 2 other water items, so I was going to see if you'd
happy
stick around.
to talk about that. So if you're good, we'll just kind of proceed with this. We'll submit it to DEQ with the status quo option, and then the next step is really just start thinking about funding. I think I would say your next fiscal year would be a good time to be starting the design process and getting things ready for your lagoon.
So what you're saying is you need to find an engineer to do it a little bit more fiscally responsible. I'm always gonna beat you up on that. Get a $3 million bill from you guys. I still love you though.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love being here too.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Eric and James.
Thanks, guys.
Alrighty, we'll run down, here. Conflict of interest declaration. Has any councilman received information pertaining to or otherwise had any contact with any person regarding any items on the city council agenda? If so, please state forth nature of said contact. Hearing none, we'll move down to consent agenda. Council, do you want to talk about any of them, pull them, or is there? What do you guys want to do?
Right.
Councilman Brennan.
I had a question for Paula. This question was asked to me earlier, so I figured I'd just get an explanation here. Why the 2 different audits from 2 different companies?
Sure, it's pretty typical for government agencies from Washington D.C. to Mountain Home Air Force Base to the city of Mountain Home to have 2 audit firms come in. I did a little research on what Miracle performed, and this would be the Cassie with Bailey's actually doing additional than Miracle. But what they do is they come in and do our year-end adjusting entries. So they close out September and then they check October to make sure there's nothing that was in like a phase 1 and it kind of got carried over to the next. You can't do that. You got to finish it all at phase 1. They recap and tie the treasurer's cash. So all of the revenue that came in, state revenue, the rural fire district, all that. They recap all that. And I'm not gonna go through every one of these, because there's more than 2 pages of what they do. They prepare a schedule of the prepaid workman's compensation. So they review not only what I'm doing, but they review what the city clerk is doing. They tie out the fixed assets. That's a huge part of getting everything ready for Harrison Co. to come in. So they tie out those fixed assets, they make sure that they're all in the correct GLs, which is the GL entries, and then when Harrison Co. comes in, it's easier for them to make sure we're in compliance. They compute accrued interest payments, they compute HRA and cafeteria plan, they obtain the vacation and the comp time, and these are just brief things they do. They recap the grant income expenses and create a schedule for federal awards. That's another thing that we have to, TIF has to report the federal awards into the federal government. So we have to make sure all of that is lined out, and then Josh reviews it to make sure we're in compliance. They gather support for component units for the URA, to make sure that we got that. They prepare the Percy Gatsby 68 pension plan disclosure calculations. And they finalize and cross-reference the trial balance work paper to supporting documents for the auditors. So that's just like some of the things I highlight that they do. And then so they do all that in preparation for Harrison Co. to come in and make sure that we are in compliance. So there's a lot of questions. They come in with a lot of questions. They don't give them to us ahead of time. I consider that cheating. And then they also work with Harrison Company to, if they had questions, they work with Harrison Company so that they're prepared when they get here to have the documentation needed to make sure that we are in compliance to report at the state level and at the federal level. And there's more Gatsby rules that came out, and there's a new transparency rule that the state's making us do. So that's what they do. It's a fabulous time.
Thanks.
Sure.
All right, council. Any other questions?
Mayor,
Councilwoman Garvey?
I'd like to pull in, please.
Okay. Anything else, council?
Mayor,
Councilman Green?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda, polling item N.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Councilman Brennan?
Question for legal. I think we've done this before. I don't want to talk about anything else, but I want to vote against something on the consent agenda. Can I just make a statement during the vote for that?
Sure, or you can note it like when there's a motion to approve it, subset the end, say you are all in favor aye, you can pull out the one that you're talking about if you don't want to discuss it, but just have it, your vote be taken down as a no, so yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thanks.
It's been motioned and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Councilman Green?
Aye.
Councilwoman Garvey?
Aye.
Councilman Brennan?
I'm going to vote aye with the exception of J and L. I'm going to vote nay on those two items.
Okay. We'll run down to old business, action item, deliberation decision on Mellon Water District land lease. Item continued from July 11th to 2023. So, it's gonna, there you are. Come on down real quick. You can sit in Mr. Yerketi's chair.
All right.
You guys stay.
Comfortable chair today.
There's the hot seat. So what's the latest and greatest?
Do I need to introduce myself again? I don't remember.
You bet.
Sure.
All right. My name's Erica Pedrosa. I'm with Mellon Water Subdivision. So we have a plan. Not much has happened, but we do have a plan. So I wanted to let you know what that is. As far as legal counsel, I've been trying all week. Finally, Attorney Dylan Lawrence reached out to me today and gave me a different number. He says he can't represent us because he's already part of the commissioner's board, so he wouldn't be able to represent us, but he gave me another attorney whom I've already reached out to, and I'm waiting to schedule an appointment with them. So I'm hoping that will happen sooner than later. And then as far as the pump goes,
there is a well sounder down in the bottom of the pump, and so we're working with Lanes, they're the people that to set it up, to remove that. Once they remove it, we want to finish a video. The video takes about 2 weeks to do, and then after that, we would send it off to get it reviewed by 3 different companies, and then they would let us know if our well can be fixed. So one of the things we found out is the screens that are at the bottom of the well are releasing some of the sediments that are getting up and destroying our pump and our motor. And so if that can be fixed, which would take about 4 weeks after they start the video for us to know, 4 to 6 weeks roughly, then we would know if it can be fixed or not. So that's kind of the timeline we have.
It's about 6 weeks, 7 weeks.
Yeah.
After?
This next week they're supposed to be coming out there and retrieving that, and then they can start the video.
Council? Anything? You still good with them proceeding?
I think we're making some good progress.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Yeah,
that. Thank you.
definitely.
guys.
Yeah, we've been working really hard to make sure we can get some information.
Okay.
Mayor,
All right.
Councilman Brennan?
does James know the history here? Have you filled him in on what we're talking about?
Not as much, other than I know you've had some struggles with the well, Mellon subdivision, know where that is, and it butts up against your system or surrounded by it, and you have a cross connection to be able to supplement them during periods like this.
And there's bigger talks of, maybe they come into our water system permanently and how that would affect as a, Paul, what was that term? A non-city.
Extraterritorial customer.
Yeah, and so how,
Yeah.
just all the options are on the table, but
Yeah,
I just
no,
want to
think
make sure.
it wouldn't be hard to integrate from an engineering standpoint. I think you'd want to do due diligence in terms of making sure it meets current standards. That you're not pumping a bunch of water and it's leaky pipes or concerns with cross contamination or any of that kind of stuff. But you've got a network already around that you could loop it in. Even if you just said I'm going to keep it just be a source or supplier to them and keep them all in their own, that's basically what you're doing now. Just use like backflow prevention and keep it separate. But if you want to take advantage of potential looping through their system or take their well into your system, then you'd look at that more closely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So hopefully if we can get it fixed, then we can and then find a permanent solution to it. That's what we want to get to the root cause. Then we don't have to have this continue. So
Well, I appreciate you showing up and
Thank you.
giving us the information. So, thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, run down to new business items were removed from the consent agenda. Item N, Councilwoman Garvey.
Mayor, my first question is where are we going to pull $22,000
Professional fees.
from the golf course?
Yes. No, sorry, City Hall.
And it's gonna take 45 to 60 days to complete this. How soon can they come out?
I think that's a very good question. I will ascertain that information and get you a definitive answer tomorrow.
Okay.
I asked him if this is something that could be expedited, get it done sooner than later.
Okay.
Hopefully it's faster than 45 days. In a perfect world, I'd like to have it done in a month.
Like within a month or done in a month? Because it says 45 to 60
Right.
days.
But I sent them hey, can you do this faster? And they're like, well, we'll have to get some information and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
Council, any more questions? Councilman Brennan?
I would make a motion to approve the True Club Solutions contract with expenses.
I'll second it.
It's been motioned and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Councilman Brennan?
Aye.
Councilman Green?
Aye.
Councilwoman Garvey?
Hey,
On down to action item number 2, deliberation decision on city buildings officials' request to repeal and replace the City of Mountain Homes FEMA code. Any questions, council, on that?
He's in the back.
Oh, okay, I was looking for Hank, I'm sorry, everybody. Any questions for Hank on it?
No.
So what do you guys want to do?
I'll make a motion to, make a motion to approve the city building officials' request to repeal and replace the City of Mountain Home FEMA code.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Councilman Garvey?
aye.
Councilman Brennan?
Aye.
Councilman Green?
Aye.
On down to item number 3, discussion item to reduce base rate water consumption and alternative garbage collection fees. So with that, this is just discussion. I told you I'd get it back to you, and so Rochelle got back with us, and then Rich got with James, and they worked out some preliminary numbers. So this is just for discussion tonight. So James, you want to give us your synopsis really quick, and then we'll get with the tips.
Yeah, and I would
Rochelle, right?
just
Okay.
preface it with a disclaimer, like, we're working through the model like at 2 o'clock this afternoon, and not sure that everything got QC'd the level that I like. But
And really quick, this is because we have residents that don't use 5,000 gallons, but they're being charged for 5,000. So this also doesn't account their wastewater rate fee either, because we didn't factor that in.
yeah.
Kind of.
So,
Sorry. go
yeah,
ahead.
and maybe just even step back a little bit. Why consider something different? I think my understanding is there's a concern that you're on a fixed income, rates continue to go up. Is there a way to get relief? And there's a lot of different ways you could provide relief potentially. You could form a program and have some type of thing where they have to, provide evidence or income or something. One option that could be considered is just, can you restructure your rates so that people that are on fixed income, which typically use less water, could pay less. And so that's the idea, And so what Rich had done, it looks like it's thinking here, is so the thought process is, could you pick could you just lower maybe what's included in your base rate and maybe lower your base rate fee and still be made whole? You still need to get all the revenue you need. So
Right.
that's a way to sort of shift some of the expenses from those who use very little to those who use more. So, and at the end of the day, your rate structure is, as a city, you have a lot of flexibility in how you create it. If you were to do it strictly based on business, what's my fixed costs, what are my variable costs, you'd have a different rate structure than you have now. The fact that you have a higher rate when the usage goes up. Well, if you want to look at strictly how it works, you probably give somebody a discount for using more water because it costs less water to produce that extra gallon than it did the first gallon. But you set up a rate structure instead that encourages conservation, which is more in line with your goals. And so you have flexibility in how you set up your rate structures to be able to achieve your goals. So this is just one example. So this was the delta. We just said, well, what if we change it to change your gallons from 5,000 gallons to 3,000 gallons, and then maybe lower your base rate from $29 to $28. So people that are using less than 3,000 gallons are going to see an actual reduction, while those who use more are going to see an increase. So if I just change that one thing, this shows, for example, it's basically a wash. So if you say, hey, every year I need to target 5% rate increase, you could pick any value in here and you could update this. And okay, I'm gonna bump up my rates to 175 and 210 or 215, and what are the impacts? And the reason it takes a minute here is because there's like 60,000 cells.
Can you make it bigger? But
I think
probably
Rich
not,
had
huh?
it like every single.
So James, I think, so you're saying that it costs, I know what it costs, but you're saying to go from 5,000 to 3,000 is just 98 cents?
No, I'm saying you could. What in this scenario? Go ahead.
No,
Okay.
I'm just trying to figure out, so if I have a user that uses 900 gallons a month, he's still paying for something he's not using. You know what I mean? I know, like, you're right for it. I'm just trying to figure out, for the person that's on fixed income that literally, so I think in the summertime, he's up to 1,000 gallons or 2,000 gallons, right? And so I'm trying to figure out how that.
So you can pick like any combination you want. You can say, hey, in your base rate, I'm going to make it 2,000 gallons.
The reason I think that the tiered rate, I love the tiered rate, because if I use a lot of water, I should have to pay for it. It's O&M, it's more wear and tear on pumps, it's more electricity. So if I'm a high water user, I should be paying a fat check for it. But if I'm somebody that on a fixed income, and I'm a person that I use 900 gallons a month,
Yeah.
which it's a toilet, maybe shower.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm trying to figure it out. Like, I just want it to be fair, because I don't want to subsidize, but I want to make it to where it's fair across the board.
Yeah. And all of these scenarios where we might tweak, I think, are in the range of fair. What I would say is there's a lot of costs that are fixed.
Right.
So regardless if you use 1,000 or you use 10,000, you still have all the same staff. You still have all the same equipment.
Correct.
You still have to
Same
replace
pipes.
the pumps.
Right.
I mean, there's the things that are the costs that are changing are like power and chlorine. I mean, pretty much all the other costs are fairly fixed. So
Right.
even if nobody used their water, you would still have like 75-90% of your expenses. So you could make the argument that, hey, most of our stuff needs to be in the base rate, but then you end up with the commodity charge that's like 25 cents a gallon, and it doesn't encourage conservation, and then there's this balance. So, but you could totally pick a different threshold and do that accordingly. Like, I just changed it here to 2,000 gallons from 5,000, and I changed $29 to $25. And you can see with these other bumps, basically you kind of have a wash. So I could, like I said, you could do a lot more sensitivity analysis. You can go look at individual residents. Off the side here, we started looking at, on average, this person's going to pay $8 more a year, and this person's going to pay $1 more a year, and this person's going to save $15 a year. You can, but that's based on whatever combination you do. Just shows how that will affect the bottom line. But if they're not using much, you can certainly reward that with a lower.
Right. I guess my thing is the fixed costs are fixed costs. Everybody has to share that equally. Now it's the other gallons, the overage. Everyone pays the same for the base, right? Now, if I'm going to use a ton of water, I guess so. I'm just trying to figure out if this is even viable. You know what I mean?
It's completely viable, and it's just something like you want to vet it. So you don't. If you say I want to be able to try to lessen the impact onto these users that use very little water, I just say play with the model, make sure you don't end up upside down. I think some other administration may have changed the big base rate or something like that, or on the commodity amount on the fly, and you don't know the implications unless you kind of assessed it, but you can totally do it.
Right. No, the council's done a really good job of getting us to where we have to be to obviously, one, to get a loan, but two, we're not subsidizing it with different fees, not going in the red. I'm just trying to see if there is a viable option for the person that pays his fair share but doesn't use the extra, obviously, like you said, the fixed costs, the O&Ms, the payment. So
Yeah.
Just thought I'd ask the question.
You know, it's you can do it. I mean, I do think it's good that you have a fairly good fixed cost like you do. You know, keep it up over 25. You know, I've seen other communities like Troutdale, Oregon's an example where they have like 0. It's you don't pay anything, everything's commodity, and then they have a wet spring, and then suddenly they don't have revenues because people didn't irrigate, and you know they're upside down. It's like you want to cover those fixed costs. So it's
I'm not. That's not what I'm. That's not what I'm asking. I just.
But if you have it at 50 or 25 or 29, I think that variable component contribution is going to be is small enough overall percentage that I think you'll still be fine.
Mayor?
Councilman Brennan.
Sorry to interrupt. I haven't done any of my own research on this, but I'd like just quickly like thinking about it, shooting from the hip, so to speak, is I see a potential for some unintended consequences too. The lower these numbers go for gallon usage and the monthly cost, it encourages people. You can correct me if I'm wrong. It's just a thought. It would encourage people to not water their lawns, and then we have neighborhoods that dry up, and every other yard turns brown rather than green. And I know we're only in control of our own yard, but I think there's going to be some unintended consequences if we move forward with that, and we want to take pride in the look of our city.
And I agree. My intent was only to see if this was something viable, and then 2, you guys tell me what you want to do. If you just leave everything the same, I think we all get a few phone calls from people. I think we've all had a few, and some people are like, "Hey, I'm close to not eating, or paying a bill or 2, and so maybe like I said." But I agree. I don't want brown lawns. I want people to have some pride and be able to water their lawn, and
So one option that could kind of achieve sort of both objectives, if you kind of at least leave the base rate where it's at, because then you're not increasing that rate, and then as long as they kind of continue, if they are really on the low end, they can use that 1,000 to 2,000, but they can also get up to 5,000 in the summer and still have the same overall bill. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, you might have those. I mean, if right now if you're averaging 5. And you change this, you might find that there's parts of the time that year where you're saving more than now, but you're paying more in the summer too. So that's another thing to consider too. Is sometimes it's the summer bill that's hard. It's like I can pay the winter,
Right?
And so if you shift more and more to the commodity, then that makes it even harder in the summertime if they haven't set aside their $1.50 or $3 savings they had all winter long.
We're finished in here, so
Okay. I guess council, do you want me to look into this anymore? Or just want to leave it as is and just keep going further, and then for water, or do you want us to delve into this anymore, or just let it go?
Mayor,
Councilwoman Garvey?
I say we leave it as it is.
Okay.
Same. Leave it.
Same. Okay. Tiff, garbage? Real quick.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mayor, Council, we got a few numbers back from Rochelle. So currently we offer a 95-gallon tote to all city residents. They currently pay $19.20, but that does include some fuel surcharge to offset our costs. I can't get you that, but right now, I could provide it tomorrow to you. But some of her rough numbers, they would have to order totes if we want to proceed, would be they could offer a 65-gallon tote, which would drop the expense monthly $2.50 for that resident. They could offer a 48-gallon tote, which would drop it $5 monthly. And then they're willing to go to just a monthly pickup service. And she did not provide that rate to us in this email. However, if they do the 65-gallon or the 48-gallon tote, all contents have to be within the tote. There's no additional totes on the side. So those are the caveats with that. If it's something we would like to offer, then I think all it would be is just an agreement with Republic Adjusted. They would bring their current agreement back to us, suggesting adding these charges and services, and then we can get it printed.
Mayor.
Councilwoman Garvey?
Sorry, Tiff. So it's $2.50 and $5 savings. So I mean, you know, that's
Right.
I think that would be I would like to explore that because there are people that don't have that much garbage.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
agree with Councilwoman Garvey.
Yeah, even like your apartment, like maybe your smaller townhomes or whatever, single couple. So yeah, let's explore. I think so. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Good to move forward and exploring more on that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can speak for our customer service gals that sit up front is a lot of the times we see the homeowner come in and say, I only put a Walmart bag in a month, and they have this big tote. And so it would encourage the savings, one, of the waste within our landfills, and
Yeah.
so there's some benefit to it, I really believe. But
I don't mind the smaller totes. I'm not really a big fan of the monthly collection though.
Not at all.
Because of smells maybe building up for
Rodents.
the neighbor or whatever. Is that?
Rodents,
Yeah.
smells.
Yeah, I don't like the monthly
Yeah.
either.
So, bring back something more on paper that's more substantial, not just an email.
This really has no effect on the city. It's
Right.
it's all passed through.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So push forward on that one?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. All right, and thanks, James and Eric too. I don't, you don't have to stay for the rest if you don't want to, but you're more than welcome to.
It's gonna be really
We'll get
exciting.
back to his dog's birthday party here, so.
Oh, and Tim's got a birthday party, so. All right.
Keep you up to
25th's a good day.
We'll run down to ordinances, action
Have a
item
good one.
ordinance
Hi,
1770.
thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
1776, rezone R4 PUD Fairfields.
I make a motion that we suspend the 3 reading rule and read this ordinance by title only for its one and only reading tonight.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Councilman Brennan?
Nay.
Councilwoman Garvey?
Aye.
Councilman Green?
Aye.
Tip, please read the ordinance.
An ordinance of the City of Mountain Home, Idaho, declaring the real property hereinafter described to be the freer field rezone from R4 to R4 PUD residential zone, subject to limitations of allowed use, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewithin and providing an effective date.
Council, you've heard this ordinance read. Do you wish it to pass? Councilman Green?
Aye.
Councilman Brennan?
Nay.
Councilwoman Garvey?
Aye.
Run down to action item number 2, ordinance 1777, vacating a portion of college additional subdivision.
I make a motion that we suspend the 3 reading rule and read this ordinance by title only for its one and only reading tonight.
Second.
It's been motioned and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Councilwoman Garvey?
Aye.
Councilman Brennan?
Aye.
Councilman Green?
Aye.
Tiff, please read the ordinance.
An ordinance of the City of Mountain Home, Idaho, vacating the portion of college addition subdivision in the City of Mountain Home, Idaho, described herewithin and providing an effective date.
Council, you've heard this ordinance read. Do you wish it to pass? Councilman Brennan?
Aye.
Councilwoman Garvey?
Aye.
Councilman Green?
Aye.
All right, recognized person in the audience. Would somebody like to get up and speak for 3 minutes? Hearing none. Final comments. Council, anything? Department heads, anything? Meeting adjourned.